It's basically just what appears to be a distant airplane flying in a straight line at a steady speed. What the pilots saw sounds really impressive and really out of this world, but generally the videos appear to be, based on actual analysis, airplanes, balloons, and airborne trash. You should check out Mick West on YouTube. He has done a really good job of breaking down what's in these videos. He also does UFO investigations for other objects, including the squid UFO that came past the base in Iraq. He's done a lot of them, and he's really credible. Also worth noting is that the Nimitz incident as described sounds very similar to the 1948 Gorman dogfight. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here. You can look into these cases if you're curious, but basically the pilots in these two cases encountered UFOs that they described as doing aerial acrobatics, flying circles around them, doing spirals and high G maneuvers that are not possible. And the interesting thing is, the Gorman dogfight and the Nimitz incident happened with two entirely different kinds of aircraft. They are like, this plane, an F-A-18, is much faster than a P-51 Mustang. It is much more maneuverable, and yet somehow the alien spaceship is still doing the same kind of aerial acrobatics and zipping all around it, as though, I guess the aliens come down, they're like, oh, hey, you know, the Americans got new planes, let's see if we can outrun them again. You know, or it's possible that what they saw was a stationary object, like a balloon, that they are flying around and producing an optical illusion that makes it look like it's moving. This is what's called the motion parallax effect. Another problem with the UFO phenomenon is what I call the secrecy problem. So the mystery surrounding UFOs often seems, like I said, to them more of secrecy than aliens. So a lot of people don't know this, but the Air Force actually admitted in 1997 that Roswell was a cover-up, just not a cover-up of aliens. So what they said in 1997 is that, yep, we lied, it wasn't a weather balloon, it was a spy balloon. It was a balloon that was launched to spy on Soviet nuclear tests. We couldn't admit that, so we made up a story about a weather balloon. In 2023, David Grush, who was a former government employee, he testified to some really incredible stuff, but unfortunately, a lot of it is, he said, was classified. He's allegedly a whistleblower. I don't know if I agree with the term whistleblower. If you're gonna say I can't show it because it's classified. I'm pretty sure the blowing the whistle part is the part where you reveal the classified information. But yeah, so an interesting phenomenon here is that a lot of government employees might actually believe the government has actually alien technology, even if it doesn't. And to give you an example, so I had a manager at my old job who worked at Palantir. Palantir is a security contractor, works with the government, they build software products. And, you know, and as counter to how we usually do software development, they basically just come to you and say, we need you to build a system that does this, this, and this, and they won't tell you anything about what it's going to be used for. They won't tell you whether it's going into a drone, or on a server, or on a satellite. You have no idea what it's for other than like how it behaves, and it's just completely siloed and in, you know, different components. So you see the point I'm getting at here is that, like, suppose you work as a metallurgist at Area 51, and they bring you a sample from some, like, and they say, this is something that came off of a crash. And you're like, all right. And they say, we need you to figure out what it's made of. And then you're like, okay, maybe this is from an alien spaceship, or maybe it's from a Chinese plane. The rumor mill can get really excited, and also the rumor mill can help with intelligence services. It can help them cover things up and create, you know, lots of smoke and when there is no fire. This is, according to the CIA, the U-2 spy plane, this is a picture from a U-2 spy plane, accounted for at least 50% of UFO sightings during the late 1950s. So this is a selfie of a UFO from a UFO. This is the pilot of the U-2 plane that went up to intercept the Chinese spy balloon that came over in February, I think it was February 2023, yeah. So this photo kind of represents a weird moment of like declassification, right? Because the U-2 spy plane was above top secret back in the 50s. So, okay, some of you might be thinking, Like, okay, so you don't think there's anything going on with UFOs? All right, look, I'm a 90s kid. I love my X-Files. I want to believe. That's why I'm here. But the fact is, we've actually put a lot of time and resources into investigating UFOs, arguably more than SETI. And we've never really found anything that is that exciting or more tantalizing than the WOW signal. And I try my best to present all these solutions fairly and be neutral, but the paucity of evidence around UFOs makes it difficult for me to take it seriously. So I don't want my cynicism to spoil you. If you really want to believe that they're already here, you can vote for that in the March Madness bracket. Cool. Okay. Is this gonna work? All right, you don't need a whiteboard. Oh no, spoilers. This is the previous one. How do I restate it?
By the back arrow.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's, or was there a back arrow?
Yeah.
Oh, this little carrot here. No, that just collapses right now. Yeah, I have to go to my, oh, okay. And, you know, I know my master password. I should have pulled this up before. I want to plug in this for a second because I don't want to.
Like you said, no signals.
Okay. Alright, now I think it makes sense. There we go. Okay, cool. Now, I will start it. So, we're going to start with, they're already here versus Dark Forest. So if you think that they're already here is a better explanation, raise your hand. Dark Forest? That's Dark Forest. All right, rare civilization versus great filter. So rare civilization is the idea that life is common, but civilization is rare. Great filter is the idea that there was something in our past that filtered us out, or there's something in our future that's gonna filter us out. So rare civilization, great filter. I think that's great filter, but it's really close to a tie. Again, rare civilization. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I think it's great filter. Oh no. Those negative scores. We are early. Rare Earth. That's a very clear winner. Stay-at-home civilization. So interstellar civilization doesn't exist, or we don't know how or where to look. So stay at home. We don't know how or where to look. Yeah, that's a powerful one. Okay, 3 more rounds. Dark Forest versus Great Filter. Dark Forest. Great Filter. Wow. Okay, Rare Earth versus we don't know how or where to look. Rare Earth. We don't know how or where to look. Amazing. All right, one last round. Great Filter versus we don't know how or where to look. Great Filter. We don't know how or where to look. Yep, all right, that confirms my expectations. So I have run this talk, I think 4 times now. And, or it's either 4 or 5 times. Every time the winner has been, we don't know how or where to look.
I think One thing that struck me as you were talking now, if you postulate that this Khrushchev 2 civilization that uses 100% of the energy from its star, right, that we should be, instead of looking for planets around stars, we should be looking where there aren't any stars.
That's the Dyson method. So it's like we would be looking for like infrared radiation as like the waste heat of the Dyson sphere, because they can't, because like they have to radiate something. But yeah, this is one more thing. I have some additional resources. There's a QR code you can scan if you want to find some of these books and other talks on the topic. The book I use the most from making this talk is called "If the Universe is Teeming with Aliens, Where Is Everybody?" by Stephen Webb. Aliens, the World's Leading Scientists on the Search for Extraterrestrial Life by Jim Al-Khalili is also good. A really good book on the topic is UFO, the Inside Story of the U.S. Government Search for Alien Life Here, Now, There by Garrett and Graff. This talk, We Might Be Alone, by Professor David Kipping at Columbia, was one of the major inspirations for this talk. I was actually in the audience for it, and I asked him a question, and that question is how I found out about that book, and that's how this all got started. So yeah, we'll go to question and answer. Now I just wanted to leave you with the quote from Arthur C. Clarke: "The two possibilities exist, either we are alone in the universe or we're not, both are equally valid." I can tell there's a lot of people who are eager to ask questions. The young lady again.
What I noticed when you were talking about the great filters is that all of the things that were in the future seemed pretty bad for us, like nuclear war, change, and those stuff. How come there weren't any ideas that might be good for us? Like, I read this book, and the story had an alien in it, and the alien was saying that there was a lot of things in our history that we could have used for good, but we decided to use things for bad. Like, we learned to split the atom, and it said that we could have done strange good, but instead we used bombs. So, like, what I'm saying is, like, how come there weren't any good stuff that could have been good milestones?
I think that's actually a really insightful question. That's true. There is, so it's not so much that the great filter is about bad things happening to us. It's the idea that there's something that could happen that would prevent us from getting to the end, getting to where we want.
So that
Now,
makes sense.
but you're right though, it doesn't have to be something bad. It could be something good. It could turn out that we actually are able to build a utopia here on Earth that would make us, so we wouldn't be so interested in meeting aliens or going out into the cosmos. So it is possible that there could be a good outcome to the great, that is a great filter. The young lady's companion.
There's a star called Tabby Star, and if you could talk a little bit about Tabby Star, and also, is there any evidence in the James Webb data? Because I heard that the sensitivity of the James Webb telescope is that it can detect pollution in.
Yeah, I'll talk about Tabby Star, I'll talk about James Webb. So the Webb is still fairly early in its life cycle. I don't think there's anything, I think you're right to say that it does have the capability of potentially detecting pollution, detecting other technosignatures, biosignatures. Tabby Star is a tantalizing potential contact. It's similar to the WOW signal. It's something that it's hard to explain it without aliens, but there are explanations that don't involve aliens. So Tabby Star, for those that don't know, is a star that was observed to have a regular sort of dimming. And so the thinking is this looks like what would happen if you were building a Dyson sphere. This looks like, somebody's putting, and realistically, I don't think that the material science will ever get to the point where we can actually build a Dyson sphere. It's probably more likely it would be like a swarm of individual objects that are in orbit. It's possible, I don't know what the future holds, but so there was a lot of people who were saying maybe this is our first sighting of a Dyson sphere. It's possible, but the issue with that is that there were some other people who went and looked at the data and they looked at the star in a different wavelength, and they found that there was no dimming on that wavelength. So I think that's consistent with the idea that this is actually like dust that's orbiting the star, and not, you know, a big piece of metal with a solar panel on it and like a holodeck. But it's interesting. It's one of those things where we take this approach of, I said this in the conversation with the Irish newspaper, that it's never aliens until it's aliens. Like, we have to allow that hypothesis to be in the differential, but you kind of have to, like, because it isn't impressive and it's exciting, we have to make that be the last thing we look at. So like with the WOW signal, same thing. It was like, I don't want to say it's aliens, but like I'm struggling to come up with alternatives. Tabby star is one that for a little bit it seemed like the best solution was aliens. There are other potential Dyson sphere like candidates. There was a group that did a paper recently where they went through like some historical data, and they said like, oh, these stars look like they could potentially be Dyson spheres. Another thing I just wanted to add about the Webb is that the capability of the Webb, like what it can do, is not necessarily matched with like what we're using it for. Because like, so there was a talk about this where it was like, well, you know, what would it take for us to use the Webb to prove that like this particular star had an oxygen atmosphere, or this particular planet had an oxygen atmosphere, which is a very strong indicator for life. And it turns out that we basically have to run it for its entire operational life, looking at that one planet, which isn't even possible because it wouldn't always be visible, you know, because the Webb goes around the sun with us. And that's not something that makes sense financially, given the amount of science that we can do with it for other things. We also need the Webb for planetary defense. Like you may have heard, there's a Torino Scale 3 asteroid that's threatening to hit Earth in 2032, and the path that it's on includes several major populated cities like Lagos, Nigeria, and Mumbai. And yeah, the Webb is due in March and May to observe that. So like, you know, fingers crossed that we're not going to have to start a major civil defense campaign to evacuate a big city. But yeah, other questions? I think you had your hand up first.
So going back to the dark matter, I heard like a more optimistic view that any civilization that survives long enough to get past, to figure out how not to destroy itself, would basically have to be enlightened and benevolent enough to, I guess, not want to come and destroy us or some other civilization.
I love that.
I wonder what you thought about that.
I think that makes some modicum of sense, but it also is kind of like, it could be vacuously true in the sense of like, well, it could be that there's no such civilization. It's like all the elephants in the moon are purple is a mathematically true statement, but it's meaningless because there's no elephants on the moon. But like, yeah, I think that's true. I think that the bigger issue with the dark forest is the issue I highlighted of like, well, how would you hide? And it's plausible that we could in the future make a quieter civilization that didn't spray. We've already done that. Like 100 years ago, like, you know, 50,000 watts radio blasting over the ocean was how we communicated. Now we use Wi-Fi, which is much shorter range. But like, I struggle to imagine how you could like really effectively, you know, use the dark forest to explain why we don't see any, right? Like it could be that it's the case that we live in a dark forest, but then that raises other questions of like, well, what are they doing to hide? And like, what? I think the interesting like next stage of dark forest is like, well, what if there's like decoys? Like what if we're a decoy? Like we don't even know. You know? What if somebody like left us here because they're like, all right, well, you know, these guys seem pretty non-threatening. Let's just, you know, let them have this section of the cosmos so that nobody comes and attacks us. You had a question?
Yeah. Drake equation. It's a whole bunch of probabilities.
Yeah.
Put in any numbers you want. Wasn't the conclusion of that, no matter what numbers you use, is that, yeah, there are civilizations, but the universe is so vast that we will never be able to contact any of them.
So the specific like result from the Drake equation you're talking about, I've often seen called the Christmas tree problem. So this is the idea of like, suppose you're looking at a Christmas tree with like flashing lights on it. Like, what are the odds that any two lights next to each other are going to flash at the same time? Like that being, you know, the idea of there being two civilizations that exist in the same time and place. I've looked at the Drake equation, I've looked at like different people running the numbers, I've done it myself a few times. And you can produce results that there's a civilization for every star. You can do that if you're optimistic enough. You can also produce that there's less than one civilization in the Milky Way, which is weird, because we know about one of them. I think that like the most interesting conclusion. So first of all, the other thing I was commenting on the Drake equation is it is amazing that the Drake equation is 50 years old and we're still talking about it, because this was literally something that Frank Drake scribbled in the back of a napkin to like talk about, like to motivate conversation, kind of like a lot of stuff in this talk. And I don't think anything in here is going to be talked about in 50 years from now. But the most interesting conclusion from it is that the dominant term in the Drake equation, the one that matters more than any of the others, is L, the last one, the lifetime of the civilization. Because if there's even one civilization that makes it to 1 billion years, then they're going to have overlap with almost everybody else, basically, or like a lot of other civilizations. This gentleman.
Now the talk is about, you know, the vast universe and the time span, right? But now we have to also realize that if the universe is expanding like crazy, what is the future of research for the extraterrestrial life?
Well, I mean, on the human scale, that's not not really a consequence. It is true that as the universe expands, we will like more and more of it will fall beyond the cosmic horizon, because like as it expands, like the expansion occurs faster than light. So like eventually we will be stuck with the stuff that is blue shifted, like locked to us. And what is that? Well, it's the Milky Way galaxy, it's the Andromeda galaxy, and the Triangulum galaxy, and all our little buddies. So there is like a universe that will last much longer, just because those are gravitationally locked to us. It will eventually be ripped apart, assuming we conclude that the Big Rip is the like ultimate fate of the universe. But I think on the human scale, it doesn't really have a big impact on SETI. It is possible though that there were civilizations that are just beyond the horizon now we can never contact them. This gentleman in the end.
No, if we ever send an astronaut to Mars to look for life, they will find life because they will contaminate Mars. It's just the nature of sending humans anywhere.
Yeah.
Where there's more bacterial cells in our body than there are human cells.
Oh yeah.
So what it means is if you send life, and this is why NASA sends sterile robots.
Or as sterile as they can make it.
As sterile as they can make them, because they don't want to find Earth life on Mars.
Yeah.
And of course, with rocks going between the two planets, that complicates the whole issue anyway. But where this comes to matter is life on Earth existed for well over 2 billion years in a very simple form, which indicates, and the geological record is fairly solid about this, and there's a fairly good understanding of geological record that life slowly progressed towards complexity. And there was a bit of a boom towards the end. Carbonaceous form, multicellular life, and off we go. But there's no evidence of like an anomaly in that 2 billion year period of single cell life on Earth that could be explained by some alien popping down with multicellular life. And so I'm suggesting that's pretty good evidence we were never visited by aliens for a 2 billion year period.
I think that's probably true. I think that the fact that we basically have one tree of life on Earth, and the fact that, but like as you said, there's no reason to think, oh, a Martian meteor like dropped here, and that's when we get this piece of complexity. Nothing looks like that. And also, there isn't really any evidence of like a second genesis, where it's like, oh, life appeared on Earth, and then 1 billion years later, it appeared a second time. Like, that didn't happen either. So I think the only way that we're going to conclude there was at least, some kind of alien contact, or the only way that we're going to conclude that there's life traveling between worlds is where it's a panspermia, where it was always, it always came from everywhere else. If there was life on Mars, it was the same thing.
But here's the problem with the panspermia thing. If say rocks are leaving Earth.
Yeah.
After the first 2 million years, they're gonna be recarrying
Yeah.
cells. And yet, that's not what we see on Earth for 2 million, well, for lots of, you get the problem.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought about this before. But no, I think it's the point is well taken. Did you forget the question?
What?
Did you forget the question?
No, I still have a question. So, in this video, there's this thing. So it's a great filter. So let's say like the idea is like I just made this up. I don't know. So the idea I made up is that like maybe what if like very long ago two civilizations met, and like what if they make like what if they set these like rules? So basically they set like great filters basically, and that's what we're doing contacting from now. So who knows? Maybe there are civilizations out there that look, but maybe we didn't apply the rules somehow because we didn't even know. So then they decided, no, let's not contact this planet because we didn't apply the rules, let's say. So do you think that could be possible?
Yes, that brings up some interesting ideas. So if anyone couldn't hear her, the question was like, what if there were civilizations in the past that came up with like rules about who to contact, and we have violated those rules? Maybe they were mad at us about, you know, all the slavery and genocide we were doing, or you know, any of the other things that, yeah, maybe they did worse, but maybe they did better. Who knows? I think that's interesting. I think that kind of harkens to another solution actually, which I had in a previous version of this talk. I removed because I wanted to make it even. I wanted to make it 4 versus 4, and the solution is called the zoo hypothesis. So it's basically this idea that like the aliens know about us. They're deliberately quarantining us. They don't want to talk to us, and they don't want anyone else to talk to us. And the problem with this hypothesis is that there isn't any like way to understand how would they enforce this. So you know, if you look at like in Star Trek, they have the Prime Directive, and the humans have this rule that says we don't contact anyone who doesn't have warp travel, because like, well, once they have warp travel, they're gonna find us anyway. And the problem with they never address in Star Trek. There's been, I don't know, a dozen Star Trek shows. They've gone to like 7 seasons, and no one's ever figured like written anything to explain this. Is that only the humans have the Prime Directive? The Klingons don't have it. The Ferengi don't have it. You know, all the other species don't have it, but somehow they also obey it. So I feel like that. I would wonder, like, well, you know, what other civilizations were there? Would any of them want to violate this quarantine?
Is your Instagram account private?
No.
Oh, could you give it to us again?
Yeah, it's
a practical question.
I should have put it in. So wait, I'll go back to that slide.
Sorry,
Just so people
I
can
just
read
looked
it.
it up instead of.
You might have, I probably picked the wrong name. Like, it's not a very easy name to spell. So,
Intergalactic Wanderer?
yeah. It's like weird. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, so I named it after a real object. So the Intergalactic Wanderer is the name. It's not that. That's the dumbbell name. But so the Intergalactic Wanderer is the name of a globular cluster. It's the most distant globular cluster that orbits the Milky Way, and it's near Orion. It's not really interesting to look at through a telescope, nor is it all that interesting to shoot it. If you go on my Instagram, you'll see like I have shot it, but I just think it's cool because it's the most distant globular cluster of the Milky Way. It's basically the thing that is the farthest known piece of the Milky Way.
Got it, thank you.
Just one last thing. I mean, any universe with a sufficiently sophisticated civilization will be able to make simulated universes. In which case, a majority of the universes in that universe will be simulations. So then the question is, are we in a simulation or are we in a real universe?
So, I hope you take this as a gentle ribbing and not as an insult, because I consider you a friend. That's true. So the argument is, all right, we gotta wrap it up, but the argument is that, most universes are probably simulated, so therefore our universe is probably simulated. That's a good argument, but I would also point out that most arguments are wrong, so therefore that argument is probably also wrong. And also this argument against that argument is probably also wrong. All right, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah.
Please watch the argument paradox.
I'm glad you all enjoyed it.
Somewhere else in that chart.
Oh, wow.
Were we still looking for,